Hello, everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age comic book podcast, Flea Market Fantasy. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen, as always, I'm joined by
Michael Dell of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
That's right. It's a very special episode, and because it's so special, we decided to have a special guest, right? Why don't you tell us who's joining us?
That's right. I think it's his 10th appearance.
Oh, well, I'll get the database out while you're talking there in just a minute.
Yeah, that crumpled piece of paper you have in your pants.
Yeah, I had to pry the chewing gum off it. But yeah, it's our old buddy Miles Watson. Miles Watson, writer.
Woo!
What did I call it? Rock on Tour. Miles Watson.
Oh God, I knew you were going to say that.
He's a big fan because I didn't want to spoil in the lead into to Miles. I didn't want to spoil what comic book you picked, Michael. So why don't you tell the kids what we're reviewing this week?
Well, we're going to review everyone's favorite science fiction property. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, including Mike Dell. And that's Star Trek, adapted by DC Comics.
Yeah, we're doing issue 1 from 1989. I think this is volume 2 of Star Trek.
Yeah, volume 2 of DC, but before this there was the Marvel series. Before that there was the Gold series, Yeah,
I'll get into that in a second. But so Miles Watson, we were talking a little bit before the show, but Mike L mentioned, hey, we have to know someone who's a Trekkie, and I didn't think I did. And now I got to reconsider things because I've known you for several years, and now I find out you're a Trekkie.
I like to hide certain things, or certain things from you specifically.
Yes.
And that's one of them. Yes, I do confess this to be true. I started watching in the 70s. I'm dating myself. I was a tiny child. My brother and I used to watch like when I was, single digits, I want to say. Actually, wow. I'm going to confess something here. My first memory as a human being is of sitting in a high chair watching Star Trek in Met, Illinois.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, probably around 1975, 76, something like that. Earlier than that, probably like 74.
Holy hell.
Yeah, I would have been a tiny enough to sit in a high chair. I mean, I still sit in a high chair for different reasons now, but
knowledge of this world is what you start. Like that's your first image of life. Michael, what's your first image of life on Earth?
It explains a lot, doesn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it kind of does.
Oh, I don't even know. I mean,
yeah,
I think playing in my backyard. I don't remember, honestly.
I think mine was probably robbing those banks.
But I do have very vivid memories of how I got into Star Trek, if you'd care to hear them.
I would love to hear them.
Here we go.
They're not interesting. But anyway, basically one summer I was having a sleepover at my aunt's house in London, Ontario, not England. And she had all the Star Trek movies on VHS. Actually, not all of them. I think, the first 5. And I marathoned them all over the week. And then I fell in love with the characters, right? But obviously the movies were like 10, 15 years after the show. So then when I got home, it was like one of those things where we got home from London. It was like 11:30 at night or whatever, and Star Trek was in syndication. This would have been 1989, I think, or 1990. And I'll tell you, in that summer in between grade 8 and 9, I invented marathoning. I watched 4 to 5 episodes of Star Trek per day, and I finished the entire series in one summer. Yeah. Did I mention I had no friends? Did I mention that? Okay. Anyway.
Apparently.
No one actually comes to classic Star Trek by friendship.
That's true.
I will straight up admit that when I was in junior high school, I was one of those kids that went up and down in popularity. I guess the word is popularity. I don't know if that's even still like in vogue. There's probably some other metric that people say they're cool by, but I was super cool when I was a little kid, and then I went through a long period of complete ostracism.
Right.
And during that period of ostracism, which lasted until I was like 10 to 14, something like that, I literally survived only by having my mom drive me to the local video store and renting, again, I'm dating myself, renting episodes of Star Trek on VHS and watching them at home when I should have been doing my homework, which of course never got done. Never. I still don't know how I didn't get held back in either middle school, junior high school, or early high school, because I just failed everything and I just never went to class because I was in the basement watching Star Trek. But I have to say, I'm very grateful because it got me through really awkward, horrible period of life. And then later when I lived in LA, I got to meet a lot of the Star Trek cast. So,
wow.
Yep. Yeah. I think I remember some of these stories, but tell Mike L. Some of the cast you've met.
The first person I met was actually Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, nice.
He was fantastic. He came to, I want to say it was the famous theater in LA it changes names. Grauman's, Mann's Chinese Theater. It's the Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard. It's the most famous.
It's like the
theater.
footprints in the sidewalk, right?
with the footprints on the sidewalk. It's the most famous movie theater in the world, but it's changed owners many times, so it has different names. But he came and they did a screening of Star Trek 4, which he directed, and then he came out afterwards to do a Q&A with the crowd. And I was shocked at how deftly he handled the hardcore nerds, who were like from The Simpsons going, yeah, in episode 56, Kirk opens a safe. I want to know what the combination is. And, this poor guy's been dealing with these fucking nerds for 50 years. And you would have thought he would have been a little like Robert Englund when I saw him speak. He was a great guy, but he was kind of like, shut up, nerd.
Right.
He doesn't have a lot of patience for the Freddy Krueger people. He's like, he loves them, but also if you give him any shit, he's going to step on you. Right. Nimoy was just like all very Zen, very Buddhist, kind of way of handling it, just like extremely positive. And I remember they tried to cut him off at the end. They're like, well, your hour's up. And he's like, I don't really feel like stopping talking. And then he turned to the audience and he's like, do you guys want me to stop?
Right.
What do you think happened then? I think they would have lynched the moderator if he tried to get rid of him then, but he was fantastic. And then to Kay, I physically bumped into him at the Egyptian Theater, which is my favorite theater to go to in LA, also on Hollywood Boulevard. He was there to do a Trek 2 and Trek 3 screening. So he actually bumped into me on his way in, and he's kind of pompous.
A little bit.
he definitely has gotten a huge swelled head from generations of fans screaming, how much they love him at him, and he's sort of forgotten how relatively unimportant his character is. But
right.
He was.
Yeah, we're talking about Sulu, right? Sulu.
Yeah, Sulu. Yeah, he was good. And then I also I physically bumped into Nichelle Nichols at the ArcLight on Sunset Boulevard. She had a Starfleet medallion around her neck that was in ivory, which I thought was really beautiful. She bumped into me and this guy I knew, Andre, huge black dude, and he went completely. I mean, this guy's huge. He's a massive bodybuilder. He's gigantic, and he went completely speechless when he saw her. Like he couldn't speak. Because to him, she was just like this. I mean, I obviously was a big fan, but he was completely in awe. And then, of course, Shatner was my crowning moment because I got to talk to him and have my picture taken with him. He did his one-man show at the Nokia Theater, and just talked for a couple hours, and then afterwards, I posed for photos with the fans and stuff. But that was the only time I ever saw my brother starstruck. He's a Hollywood guy, and meaning he's been out there for 20 some years, and he's pretty successful. And he's done interviews with George Lucas, with like top huge people, James Cameron, like top people. But he went nonverbal when we met Shatner. My brother couldn't speak, so that was kind of because we grew up, watching him, so we were completely in awe. And to round this discussion out, there's if you watch the original Star Trek, there's obviously those visual cues that Shatner gives with his face and his hands and everything.
Sure.
There was a point at which he was doing his shtick on stage, his one-man show, and he made a face. I think he was talking about T.J. Hooker, actually, when he was talking. But he made a face, and he turned to the side and made this face, and my brother and I started elbowing each other and laughing hysterically. We were in the front row, and for which we had paid a pretty penny for that privilege. And it was such a Kirk gesture, his face. It was such a James Kirk gesture on his face. We started losing our shit. but it was the thing that only a total nerd would have picked up on. So yes, I'm being outed completely today. Completely. This is a complete outing.
What?
I don't know
Mike
what
L,
to do.
he mentioned T.J. Hooker. Adrian Zamed was on there, and you love Grease too. Did you
Oh,
ever watch-
that's right. I
Did you ever
watched
watch-
as a kid. Yeah,
All right, just wanted to check.
definitely.
Mike L loves Grease too. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you know
All right.
that the theme song from T.J. Hooker, that incredibly bombastic theme song from T.J. Hooker, was scored by none other than Mark Snow, who did the X-Files.
Wow, get out of
Yes.
town. Really?
Yeah, it's
idea.
true, and it's you can't really truly appreciate anything in life until you've heard the score for T.J. Hooker. It is violently bombastic. It's like the '80s. Well, let's see.
Wait,
The
I seem
Yeah,
to recall it. But yeah.
it's one of those pulse-raising. It's like the '80s in a single.
Yeah.
In
There's
a
no
song.
way. Yeah.
No way to capture. Well, speaking of
Here
the
we
TV, oh, you have the audio? Miles brought clips. Gonna play a clip. I don't know. We can't hear anything, Miles.
Yeah, you don't want to hear it anyway. But
All right. Fair enough.
it will
Good
destroy
effort.
your mind.
Although last week on the show to preview this episode, Mike L played some Star Trek theme right on. I don't know
That's
how.
right.
Yeah.
To set the
Mike L
mood.
Pro. But all right, so the Star Trek. Let's go over the TV shows real quick. Let's see how big of a Trekkies you guys are. Mike L, the original TV show. How many seasons and when did it air? How many episodes? Come on.
Well,
I'm sure you know
3, but I believe it was 66 to 69.
this. Well, yeah, 66 to 68. But yeah, 3 seasons.
Okay.
And 76 or 79 episodes. I'm sorry, 79 episodes. Miles Watson, Next Generation. How many seasons?
7.
That is correct. Would you care to guess the years?
This is going to be a guess, but I believe it started in the 86.
87.
87. Okay.
87 and 93.
Right there.
How about the episode number? Because Next Generation has more episodes than any other Star Trek show.
I would have to do math to do that, but it would be about 22 episodes times 7, whatever that is. So it would
Can I
be-
guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to guess 178.
That is correct. It's 178. Did you look that up? I'm guessing Miguel looked it up because he cheats.
No, I didn't.
He's Canadian. He cheats.
Canadians
All right,
have the
so-
internet.
So, Miguel, next up, what's the next show, Miguel? Do you remember the third Star Trek show?
Deep Space Nine.
That is correct. How many seasons?
I think it was 7 as well.
That is correct. 7 seasons from 1993 to 98. And then how many episodes, though, Miguel?
You know what? I'm not sure. I don't know.
What? 176. 2 fewer
Oh.
than Next Generation.
Same basic number per season. So
Miles Watson, do you remember the fourth Star Trek series?
is it Enterprise or Voyager?
It is Voyager. How many
Okay.
seasons?
Didn't that run for 7 as well?
It also ran for 7. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is the one with Kate Mulgrew, right?
Yes.
I never watched Voyager. I couldn't even make it through the pilot. So
I just know Kate Mulgrew because she was on 2 episodes of Cheers. So that's how I know her. But that
yeah, she
also
was on a
ran
lot
for...
of shit. She was on a lot
But-
of shit.
Yeah, she was almost going to marry... she was a politician who was going to be married to Sam Malone, like at least... But she was just using him for his political clout because he's a local sports hero, you know. But and then Sam chose Diane instead. If you want to get into it, let's do a Cheers podcast, Miguel. How about it?
There you go.
But Voyager, 172 episodes, and then finally Star Trek Enterprise was the 5th big Star Trek series, 4 seasons from 2001 to 2004, 98 episodes. Now, Miguel, which was your favorite of the big 5 there?
Well, the original, but I Next Generation, you could say pound for pound is better. It got deeper into the characters. It had a few arcs in there, so you could argue it's better written. But I think the original Star Trek has the best music. cinematography, sound effects, everything. The characters, I like Kirk, Spock, and Bones, slightly better than Picard, Data, and Riker. So, but
Yeah.
Next Generation is still a great show.
Look at you breaking it down like that. Miles Watson, do you concur with that sentiment?
I think you always have to go with the original series just because it built the sandbox that everybody else has been playing in for the last 50 years. And you're never going to beat the chemistry that Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley had in that Holy Trinity or whatever they call it. It was a perfect character construction of one character divided among three men. I've never seen it on a show since. I never saw it on a show before. You had Kirk as the kind of balancing act. Spock was the cold, logical side who was always telling you to do the thing that your brain told you. Mm-hmm. McCoy was the guy that was always telling you to do the thing that your heart told you, and Kirk was in the middle and kind of provided that bridge between the two sides. And there was just a genius in that's never been reproduced, I think, on any show ever to that degree. And I'll absolutely defend that opinion. But I think Next Generation was excellent. I think Deep Space Nine is one of the most underrated television shows that's ever been on the air. It took way too long for that show to get good. You could also argue that of Next Generation, the first couple of seasons have not aged well.
Right.
They're really embarrassing and cheesy. A lot of those episodes, they're just bad. But when it showed the flashes of goodness, you could see the bones of what was gonna come. And then in the third season, the show just suddenly came together and became a really good show. But a lot of people find Next Generation too talky, too cerebral. There's too much technobabble. All that is legitimate criticism, but it's still a very good show. It's just, and it has aged well, just not the first couple seasons.
Right.
Well, since 2017, there's been 5 different series running on CBS All Access and Paramount Plus. Have you guys been watching any of those? Miles, any idea on those?
You're talking about like Discovery and that shit?
Yes. Yeah.
No, nothing in the Jar Jar verse has the slightest interest to me.
I don't know what that means. Jar Jar.
Any kind whatsoever. None. Less than 0. Nothing. None of that is Star Trek in the sense of they've missed the entire original point of what drove that series and what made it great. They've tried to do the whole kind of, the movies try to do the noise and explosions and the dumbing down, none of which was a Star Trek. And the series are all trying to do the dark, the very twisted, the tormented characters, the flawed, and everything is dark and morally compromised, and it's never clear who the good guys are. And Star Trek was never about that. It was never meant to be about that. That's kind of a debasing, perversion, weak, kind of tortured modern interpretation that it was never meant to be. It's like an abomination. It shouldn't exist.
Well, they have one more series slated to begin in 2022 and 3 other ones in the pipeline.
Yeah, they're kicking that fucking piñata till every last piece of candy comes out the mouth. And I don't doubt that there's individually good episodes and so forth. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can continue a franchise in a radically different way and still carry its spirit forward. But Star Wars, Star Trek are very different things. Yeah. And you can't take the aesthetic of one series and just graft it onto the other. J.J. Abrams was guilty in the film of just incredibly dumbing down and saying it for the record. Well, we had to dumb it down. It was too cerebral. And I just feel like that's the epitaph of a lot of modern writing and films generally, not to take this conversation too outside the rails of where we're going. But as a writer, Mike Dell, I know you can appreciate, classical storytelling, there was nothing wrong with it. You don't have to fix what wasn't broken in the first place. And I feel like one of the amazing things about the original series was the quality of writing. You had guys like Harlan Ellison, D.C. Fontana, Theodore Sturgeon. They had these great science fiction writers coming in and writing episodes for them, and that told really complex moral problems. And there was a lot of action, and there were hot space babes, and they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
But, you're never going to find more beautiful women than were on the original Star Trek. My God.
Wow.
Look up the women of Star Trek on the original series, and I mean, you will find some of the most beautiful women you have ever seen.
Well, I do enjoy scholarly pursuits. I might have to do some research.
And why not enjoy such research of the micro miniskirt of the 1960s? But to me, what it boils down to is you had this very good storytelling, but you also had a series that it was fundamentally driven by positive hope. You know, there were a lot of uplifting themes without being saccharine in the original Star Trek. And now they're trying to do the modern thing of, you know, the Ron Moore thing of make everything really dark and make everything really morally conflicted and undercut everything. And the good guys are also the bad guys. And that has become such a mania with storytellers now that it's like almost a joke to me. Nobody's trying to do anything other than that. And Star Trek was not about that. It isn't about that. You can't be that and keep in the spirit of that series, in my opinion. And I think the majority of fandom would agree with me, at least broadly, in saying that, you know, Trek is supposed to be uplifting. Period. Before and after anything else, it's supposed to be uplifting, and it's about, you know, it asks complicated questions and then doesn't always give a simple answer. You know, but now it's like explosions and, you know, it's fast editing, and just like if you make enough noise, the audience will forget that there's absolutely no fucking plot to this stupid ass movie, or that we're rehashing things that were done better decades ago. You know?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I of course loved the Star Wars, but as I got older and I started watching Next Generation and stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I like Star Trek better, because it just, I haven't watched all the old ones, but whenever I do watch an old episode of Star Trek, I enjoy it. You know, because like you said, there's always some moral issue or some logical, ethical concern going on that they got to get around. And also from a writing perspective, Miles, I guess Star Wars would be classified as what, space opera, and Star Trek is like classic sci-fi, like, you know, more hardcore.
Yeah, they're
sci-fi.
not the same in any way, shape, or form. I've recently been rewatching a lot of Star Wars stuff, and it struck me as I was watching it how very different it is from Star Trek and from other things in that sci-fi, space opera, low fantasy, you know, kind of giant ballpark, because Star Wars is really more that classic tale of the boy pulling the sword from the stone, you know, the chosen one, the Harry Potter thing about the journey to, you know, fighting evil. And it's very basic. And you have those trope characters like Obi-Wan is Merlin, and, you know, Darth Vader is the Black Knight, and, you know, C-3PO is the Fool, and, you know, the classic characters of Arthurian lore, whereas Star Trek doesn't have that kind of one-to-one analogous kind of thing to some old ancient story. It's a very, you know, they always used to say it was wagon train to the stars, but that's not what Star Trek was. That's not what it was. It was really about, they're given these moral problems and these difficulties to overcome, but they have to do it in a way that's not just let's go in and slaughter everybody. It was cerebral, but they also knew how to balance it with the hot space babes and fist fights and stuff. That's what I really liked about Star Trek, is they really knew how to balance the popcorn aspect of entertainment, the TNA aspect of old school entertainment, with the more thoughtful aspects of entertainment. And they weren't afraid, you know, to talk up to the audience, not just talk down. You know, I'll never forget when I was working in makeup effects, I was at a place called Quantum Studios, and there was a guy there named Walt Phelan, and Walt Phelan played Dr. Satan in one of those Rob Zombie movies. I don't know which one it was, House of a Thousand Corpses or something. And he was leaving early that day we were running foam for some television show, and he goes, well, I'm going, and if you knew Walt, he's like really like a character out of a book, like almost kind of like a pulp novel. And he goes, well, I'm going to go see that Abrams movie, but I guess it'll be like all the others. He was talking about Star Trek II, Into Darkness. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he goes, J.J. Abrams, explosions, people falling off things. And he walked out. Well, I saw the movie about a week later, and I walked out, and I thought, my God, he's right.
Explosions and people falling off things.
And people falling off things from great heights. So, yeah, that to me kind of sums it all up.
Mike L., you also picked a Star Wars book for us way in the early days of Flea Market Fantasy.
Yes.
So do you have a favorite? Do you prefer Star Trek or a Star Wars? Do you care?
I think they're equal in my heart. I liked Star Wars from when I was younger, from when I was about maybe 5 years old. I didn't get into Star Trek until I was maybe 12, so obviously it goes back farther, Star Wars. But I still like them both equally. I will say, though, for some reason, the Disney movies, the Star Wars Disney movies, even though I have mixed feelings about them, I'm still in. I'm still excited about the next one. I still bought all the new ones on Blu-ray. But as far as Star Trek, Discovery, I gave maybe 2 or 3 episodes, gave up. I thought it was garbage. Picard, I watched season 1, and it had some moments that I really liked, but overall, I thought it was garbage. And so I really think, and the J.J. Abrams movies before that, they were enjoyable, but the more I watched them, the more angry they made me, because they took a really intelligent, franchise and turned it into a big dumb action movie franchise. And I agree with you, Miles. Like, this new Discovery stuff is just depressing and trying so hard to be serious, but it's not even doing it well. If I want to watch a really good drama or a really good whatever, those shows are out there, but this show isn't even good. It's like 15th rate Battlestar Galactica. So I don't know.
And then it all comes, and it's very interesting that you mentioned Battlestar Galactica, because Ron Moore did Deep Space Nine,
right?
And it was his frustrations in his mind with the type of storytelling that he wanted to do with Deep Space Nine. He didn't feel he was allowed to do it, so he ended up doing Battlestar Galactica, which was a very family-oriented, kind of positive, uplifting, old-school hero type show in its original incarnation in the 70s that I grew up with. And he turned it into this very dark, very morally conflicted story. And, which is a source of great controversy among fans of Galactica. Some people feel like he really betrayed that vision. Other people felt like he, took storytelling to a different level. I kind of see it both ways. He did betray the original vision very much, but he was trying to do something, much more modern. But he also kind of created a monster in that kind of tortured, morally conflicted, has become a trope. It's like you can't just have a hero anymore. You can't have anyone be good. Everyone has to be fucked up and tortured and kind of vicious. And, it's the good guys and the bad guys are only distinguishable. They're not distinguishable in terms of their methods, only in terms of what's driving them goal-wise, which is very fascist in outlook, if you want to go full Orwellian there and go back to like how he used to analyze literature for fascist tendencies. But to rein this in, the guy who did DS9, which I think is excellent, when it got good, it got excellent. It took way too long, but when it got there, he took Star Trek and he dirtied it up just enough to make it more realistic without betraying, in my mind, the original vision. But Galactica is that source of, controversy in this whole kind of sci-fi nerd argument of where do you draw the line between transitioning out of the heroes who are almost boring Mary Sue's for being perfect and heroes who are so fucked up that they've forfeited our interest by virtue of not really being heroic in any way.
Right.
Hey, Michael, is there a Battlestar Galactica comic book anywhere?
Oh, well, there's definitely a 70s one. And
I was going to say there has to be, right?
Yeah, there might be a new one, but I don't know. I don't know if there's one for the new show. I don't know.
There's even I saw one in a comic book store in LA that was a crossover of the new and the old.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, if you can believe such a creature exists. I couldn't believe it. I picked it up and I was like, what the fuck is this? It had like the original Starbuck and then the girl Starbuck. It had the, and then do you want to talk about, Cylons? It's like, well, you had Apollo in the original series was played by Richard Hatch. Well, in the reboot, they had another actor playing Apollo, but they brought back Richard Hatch to play kind of a complicated villain named Tom Zarek. So
you can't do that.
They did. It's great. They did, and it was an unusual.
Oh, that's
choice,
right. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
all right. Well, let's get. Well, let me give you some background real quick on the Star Trek comic book run. As Mike L. mentioned, Gold Key published Star Trek from 1967 until 1978. It did 61 issues. And I guess those early ones, they would have like photos from the TV show as the cover, and then they would tell a story inside. And then in 1979, Marvel published the comic book version of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. How do you feel about that movie, Mike L., the first one?
I think it's plot-wise, it's an average episode of the TV show, but I love the aesthetic of it. Like I can watch it over and over again just for the. I don't know. I like the special effects. I like the costumes. I like the music. I like the acting. It's just that the plot is really only 45 minutes, but it's stretched out over 2 hours.
Oh, all right. So, Marvel did some comic books of it, and then they kept doing stories after that, and they published 18 issues total over the next 2 years. But because their deal was with Paramount, the movie company, they could only do stories based on the movie characters and concepts. They could do nothing from the original TV show. So, a little restrictive there. And then, so they gave up the license. DC came in 1984, and they had their first Star Trek run, and that lasted until 88, and that was 56 issues and 3 annuals. Then they took a little break, but then the second series that we're doing here today started in 1989, and it ran until 1996, producing 80 issues. And then they also did 2 Next Generation series, Michael.
Yes, that's right.
Then, Malibu Comics got the rights in 1993. Remember Malibu?
Oh, yeah, of course.
That was a wild time.
I had a stack of about 100 Malibu comics a few months ago. I gave them away.
And,
no one wanted them.
Yeah, so Malibu, Miles Watson, they had the rights in 93. They did a Deep Space Nine series for 36 issues. You love the Deep Space Nine. Maybe you should look into that. And then Marvel got the rights back in 1996. And they did 5 different Star Wars series over the next 2 years. But then someone at Marvel said, hey, you know what? These books aren't profitable at all because we're paying so much money in the licensing fees. Fuck it. We're canceling them all. And they got rid of them all. And then,
wow.
And I guess Star Trek was still very restrictive in what these companies could write about and what they could do with the stories. So it kind of soured things for DC back in the 80s too. And then finally, I think they went to somewhere else now. Some company called like IDW or something, Michael?
Yeah. I think that's it, yeah.
So they're still publishing Star Trek books these days. But there you go. Miles Watson, did you and your brother have Star Trek comic books at all?
We had a few, but I was not ever really interested in either Star Wars or Star Trek comics because the ones we had, I just never felt like they got the voice right for most of the characters. The writers, I don't think the writers really understood, at least not the comics that I saw, the writers really understood the voices. I think it's crucial when you're writing series TV, from episode to episode, you have to have writers that understand the voice of the character and don't stray too far outside that. And I think that goes double for comic books because when you pick up a comic book of your favorite TV show, series, movie, whatever, you want to kind of feel like it's part of that universe.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel like you're reading something that was written by Joe Blow, who just like, oh, who's this character of Captain Kirk or Luke Skywalker or, Starbuck. You don't want that. You want somebody that's like, oh, wow, that's something he'd say. I didn't really get that from a lot of the movie crossover comics when I was growing up. I didn't feel that.
I had similar feelings reading this book here today. I was like, well, I don't think he would say this exactly. But the writer here for this issue is Peter David, who I know, Mike L., you enjoy quite a bit. I've never enjoyed anything he's done that I've
read.
Well, here, to be fair, he's written thousands of comic books.
Yeah.
I've probably just read the bad ones. I don't know.
Negative Nancy in Sector 7G, and his name is
But hey, get this though, Peter David, he is quite the Trekkie. He met his first wife at a Star Trek convention in 1977.
Nice.
Look at that. He was hanging out.
That's where I got to go to meet women. Star Trek.
And Peter David wrote the first 15 issues of this year Volume 2 of Star Trek. He did 17 total, plus he did 3 annuals. And he also did 7 issues of Volume 1 in 1 annual.
Right.
So he did a Star Trek. And then he also went on to write a bunch of Star Trek novels as well.
True.
A shit ton of them. Miles Watson, did you ever read the Star Trek novels?
I read a couple by James Blish, didn't like them. that's an unpopular opinion in the Trek community, but I thought he missed the voices of the characters by a couple 100 miles. I just did not think that he understood the character voices at all.
I almost said what? A
Not well.
couple hundred parsecs. That's a Star Wars thing, right? Parsec or... Am I right or no? Nothing?
No, well, parsec is a real thing, but
Oh, I had no
Yeah.
idea. shows you I'm not much for this Earth stuff. I don't really know a lot of the measurements we use here. The artist on this book here we're reading today is someone named James Fry, who I had no knowledge of whatsoever. Michael, anything about James Fry?
he did some fill-ins for Spider-Man and I think Iron Man. I don't know much about him otherwise.
He drew 11 of the. He drew the first 11 issues of this series and 12 total plus one annual. He has 27 credits at DC. He also did 2 issues of Birds of Prey and a Doom Patrol annual. And he has 54 credits at Marvel, including Avengers issue 319 and 320, Mark Spector Moon Knight, and a couple issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. He also did the first 4 issues of Nomad. Do you remember Nomad, Michael?
Nomad, which is the Captain America spinoff, yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
No one mentions the Nomad these days, probably for good reason. Yeah, he didn't Nomad. And all right, we'll talk about his art there later when we get through this. Also, the cover, Michael, let's talk about the cover. It's drawn by a fellow named Jerome Moore.
Yeah, great cover. I love it.
Yeah, it is a very well-drawn cover. Miles, do you like this cover?
I'm looking at it right now. It's okay.
Oh, just okay. It's very well drawn, at least. Yeah, we got the Enterprise coming right at us in the lower half of the book, and then the cast and like their movie outfits, right?
They
This is what they're
definitely
wearing.
did the faces justice in this.
Yeah, it looks
the real
exactly like
faces.
Yeah.
It's not an interpretation. It is the actors.
Yes.
And
like
Michael, it says the adventure begins anew down in the bottom right.
Yes. Yeah, well, do you want me to, other than that, do you want me to describe it any further?
Yeah, if you have anything else to add.
Well, I mean, it's like a cast photo, but drawn as like a comic book, but it's not just kind of it's not stiff. Like, there's some elegance to this guy's pencils, which I really like. And it's got the original cast, Scotty, Uhura, Bones, Kirk, Spock, Sulu, and Chekhov. And then it's got the Enterprise coming at you, and it says the adventure begins anew, which you already said, and then it says first issue, and that's pretty much it. Oh, we should also point out it's in DC's new format.
What's that new format, Michael?
Which was slightly better paper. I think it was Mando paper.
Oh, all right.
Yep.
Hey, this is $1.50. Holy hell.
Yep. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but I believe the continuity of this comic takes place after Star Trek V, I think.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And so we open up here with basically a Klingon. This is a videotape. They call it a tape. Talking to the screen. There shall be no peace as long as Kirk lives, which I believe is a scene from Star Trek 3, I think, or 4 maybe. And I actually read an interview where Peter
4.
David said, yeah, okay, 4. Peter David saw that scene and he thought they'd go somewhere with it, but they never did. So he thought, okay, well, I'll pick up on it, that the Klingons kind of have it out for Kirk. So that's what we open up with. Then we have a scene that's kind of recalls Star Trek 2, where Bones and Kirk are just kind of sharing a drink and chatting about stuff, you know. And it's pretty cool. They're just sitting. I don't know, Mike Dell, if you can survive, several pages here with no fist fights. I don't know if you can
Kind of sucks.
get through that, but yeah.
I know I wanted to punch some people when I was reading.
Oh yeah. And they're basically just talking about the Klingons. So they're kind of like establishing the status quo for human-Klingon relations after Star Trek V, which are still not great. And then they start talking about the Enterprise, and there's kind of a, like they're kind of joking around about the Enterprise. Huh?
They're not talking about the Enterprise. They're talking about Bones.
Oh, yes, that's right. They're talking about a specific woman. That's right.
Yeah, Bones says, hey, let's get some female companionship up in here, right, Miles Watson? He's like, hey, let's get some ladies.
Yeah, Bones is thinking that Kirk is going to promise him a night out of loving with some ladies, like in the old days in the original series, but Kirk has other plans.
Right.
Yeah. Miles, well, let me ask you this, because there's a point here where Bones, they show him on page 2 here. He says, yeah, well, I don't think he's any too interested in meeting you either. He's talking about the Klingon. Does that sound like yeah, well? Would Bones ever say yeah, well? That just seemed weird to me. I don't know. You know him better than me. Does that sound like something he'd say?
It's a little out of voice, yeah. He swears, he curses, he's very informal and sometimes very aggressive with Kirk. In fact, he's the character who's the most disrespectful to Kirk. He doesn't really take shit from him, and he gives him shit. But the way he speaks, I don't think they did a great job with Bones' voice in this conversation. No.
Do you think Kirk sounds like Kirk too? Like I don't know. Like if I could only meet with him, talk to him, make him understand. Is that something like Kirk would say?
That I didn't have an issue with as words that Kirk might say completely taken out of context. Given Kirk's hatred for Klingons, because this comic book, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike L., is this between 5 and 6, the film?
Yes.
Okay, so he should hate the Klingons. Like, he shouldn't be, if only I could meet him, talk to him. No, absolutely not. That's wrong. Kirk's burning hatred of the Klingons exists into the 6th film, and that's where it's kind of resolved.
Right.
But they killed his son in the 3rd film, and he hates them. He absolutely hates them, and he shouldn't be, if I could just meet with him. He should be like, yeah, if I could only meet with him, I could break his neck and throw him out of an airlock. Like, that would be in the correct voice for Kirk of him wanting this guy dead. Definitely not that line. That was misplaced line.
So yeah, Michael, they're having this little chat, and but Kirk's talking about this lady he wants to get with, and he's like, "You're right, Bones. Come on, let's go to her." And Bones is like, "Come on, Jim. You don't need me along." And Kirk says, "Of course I do. It wouldn't be the same without you. They're going to make 3, Michael. They're going to have the threesome." But no, the next page, turn the page, and we see, they're going to go. The lady they're talking about is the Enterprise.
Right.
They're going to go get back on the Enterprise. Oh, man. I know.
The Enterprise is a beautiful lady, and we love her. Actual quote from Kirk. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm very confused about this, Michael. So they got to go to the Enterprise. We see, like, the Enterprise. It looks like it's in like a docking station or something. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, just like in the movies, yeah.
Okay, so they get on the ship there, and I guess it's their return to the Enterprise, because we find out that, I guess in the last, did this happen in the movie, that the Enterprise kind of got blown up?
Yeah, the Enterprise was destroyed in Star Trek 3.
Yes.
And then they got a new one at the end of Star Trek 5.
At the end of 4.
Or was it 4? Okay, end of 4.
So
that's right.
So do you think this is between 4 and 5 then, or it doesn't matter? Who cares? But anyway, so the Enterprise is getting fixed up, and Kirk says, "Hey, I heard it's about ready to start flying again, so we should get back on there. Why wait?" So they get on the ship, and then we cut to them we cut to a scene with Spock, Sulu, and is that Chekhov, and they're playing chess, one of them crazy Star Trek chess games with like the 5 levels or something, against some alien lady with antlers and a prehensile tail or something. And so we see them on the Enterprise, and then like the next scene, Spock and them are surprised to see Kirk on the ship. Like, what? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, because Kirk came on the ship and then went to the bridge without them knowing.
But they're already like flying out in space and everything.
Well, because
they have they were docked, and now they're out in space. Don't you think one of them would have been on the bridge when they like took off and stuff, and like, hey, there's the captain, But they're just like,
well, maybe
chess.
they just thought someone else was piloting it. I don't know.
Yeah, Miles, does that make sense to you? Or am I the only one here that's confused by this?
That's confused by what? Could their confusion over Kirk being on the...
Yeah, like, wouldn't they have known, like, as soon as he comes on the ship, wouldn't they actually know? Like, because they were in dock, and now we see them flying through space. Would they leave the docks without knowing the captain is there? Like, that seemed weird to me. Am I getting caught up by my official Star Trek protocols of flight and everything? But I just think, they would know the captain's there.
It would be an embarrassing lapse if the ship took away from space dock, and then the captain walks on the bridge, and they're like, Captain, you're back. Like, yeah, okay, yep, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
don't need to be
pay attention to that.
all
but,
nitpicky with my, official Starfleet protocols, Michael, but it just seemed a little weird. I don't know. But anyway, all right. So, Michael, they're playing chess. Tell us about the big chess scene.
Well, yeah, so they're playing chess, and this is 3D chess. And I'm not a chess guy, but if I did play chess, I would play this kind of chess. And, so they're playing chess with this, like you said, woman with antlers. And she uses her tail to, move the piece. And then basically what happens is she's all bummed out because she couldn't beat Spock. But then who is it that points out no one can beat Spock except Kirk? Yeah. Oh, no, Spock does. No, who points it out?
I think Chekhov says that or something.
Yeah, Chekhov does.
Yeah.
But
and then they're all... Oh, go ahead.
Like she's like he's like her mentor, I guess, and she's the mentee. Spock is teaching her about chess. But here's another moment, Miles, where I had questions about the voice of the characters. Because after he beats her, and she says, I gave you a rough moment or two there, though. And then we have Spock saying, if you mean emotional distress, certainly not. And if I were capable of such emotions, the only one I would have felt would be pride that a pupil has so challenged her teacher. That doesn't sound anything like Spock, does it? Or no?
I didn't think that was too far off. I mean,
really?
Especially the first half of it, Spock would have said something very similar to that as far as, I'm not capable of emotions. But then him undercutting that statement and hinting that he does possibly have emotions is actually something that he has. I wouldn't say it's a common thing for Spock, but Spock was a somewhat inconsistently written character in Star Trek in that Nimoy nailed his voice pretty quick, but the writers didn't always entirely know how to write him. Especially in the third season, they didn't entirely know where to go with him, but I would say the first half of that is pretty Spock-like. The second half, maybe not quite as much, but I don't think that's an egregious violation.
Okay. Definitely. Yeah, I was concerned about the undercutting in the second half. But again, like this is set more on the movies, so I don't know. I'm not a big...
Spock had a sense of humor. It was just that his sense of humor was to make a statement without laughing himself, but he would sometimes make a sarcastic remark like about McCoy, or, you know what I mean? Like, he would... Spock was a complicated character because he said he didn't have emotions, but he did have emotions. He just was very good at hiding them.
Okay.
And it was very important for him to hide his emotions. So sometimes he would sort of allude to that in a backhanded kind of way.
All right. Yeah, it just seemed a little weird to me, but yeah, maybe he softened over the years. Because I guess my image of Spock is like season 1, 2, early Star Trek, and like I don't know.
Well, especially after he dies in 2, the version that comes back in 4 is a very different person who's not really doing the Vulcan thing so hardcore anymore.
All right, that makes sense. All right, so Michael, he's proud of his little mentee that she almost beat him in the chess, I guess, and then he leaves. And then Chekhov and Sulu are talking to the lady, and this lady wants to get with Sulu.
Right.
What is going on? She's barking up the wrong tree there. Am I
right? But Sulu is not interested because he's on duty. He's got to do his job, right?
Yes.
And Chekhov's like,
he's not interested.
What is this incredible attraction women have in you? We're just friends. Are you sure she knows that? See, if you do it in their accent.
Yes, then maybe it does sound better, yeah. Can you do a Nimoy, Michael? Can you read that dialogue in Nimoy?
I don't know. I used to think I could do a Kirk, and I tried to do a Kirk, and it was embarrassing, so...
All right, yeah, but Sulu, he turns down the space lady, and then they come up on the bridge there, and there's Kirk and Bones, and they're like, oh, hey, Captain, I didn't even know we were out in space, and you were flying the ship. What?
And then Spock, Captain, I heard you had just returned. See, now maybe this is just an error of the artist, right? Putting those stars in the background. Or I guess you're right. They did show it a few pages earlier, actually in space. So it's pretty, straightforward. Right? I don't know.
Anyway, all right, Michael. So go ahead.
Oh, wait a minute. The mystery's solved on digital page 11. We see that it's still really close to the dock. So I think it was just exiting the dock that whole time. That's what was
We
happening.
see that it's still really close to the dock. But there was a panel earlier where they were clearly in deep space flying around.
Well, there was stars in the background, but the stars outside my window right now, and I'm not in space, right?
All right. Yeah, all right. Okay.
So
Sure. Whatever.
anyway,
All right.
yeah.
So, hey, Uhora's here. Look, Nichelle Nichols. She's here now.
Did you say Ahura?
Uhura. How do you say her name? Uhura,
I think
right?
it's
Uhura.
Uhura. And anyway, so yeah.
Miles,
so,
how do you say her name?
Uhura?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uhura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Mike always makes fun of how I pronounce things.
Well, there's a slight difference in accent, so what do you expect, right?
All right.
But anyway, so yeah, there's all these. Let's see, and I gotta say, Peter David did his research because these are all. You could argue that they're all cliches, but there's all the standard Star Trek cliche jokes of like joking around about Russians inventing things, right? Well,
Yeah.
maybe that's the only one, but but you know, I think these are pretty on model. You know, I think so anyway. So anyway, once they're flying out to space, and Uhura's like, you know, it's Captain, it's Starfleet. They say they have our first mission for us. And then, so we see it leaving like the space dock, and then we cut to a new character who we've never seen before, and he is sending out a distress call, right?
Yeah, this also confused me because Uhura says, hey, we have our first mission, and then we have this guy sending out a distress call. At first, I thought he was talking to them, you know?
Yeah, but it does say
Elsewhere.
But yeah,
So we know he's elsewhere, but they're having a conversation. So it's almost thought like he was talking to them or to Space Fleet. You know,
I see. I could see how someone would be confused by that. Yeah,
some idiot would be confused by that. I can understand how some dope, some American dope, could be confused.
With an accent, yeah, could be confused. But anyway, so he is sending out a distress call, and he gets in touch with a ship, and they're like, you know, the gods you turned your, or he's like, thank the gods, and they're like, the gods you turned your back on, Argus, the gods you insulted, the gods who have condemned you. And he's like, no,
I thought that was Uhura giving it to him. She was on the business, you know, like
So yeah, we don't know yet who he's talking to or what they're talking about, but then we cut back over to the Enterprise, and it's obviously flying through, I guess, warp space or whatever you call it.
Yeah, right next to the docking station. They're right next to it.
Yeah. And it has this unusual rainbow effect, which we've never really seen in the movies or the show or anything. But then we cut to inside, and now this is the one weird thing I don't like about the comics, is that in the Star Trek TV shows, obviously all the aliens look exactly like humans because they're played by human actors, right? But in the comic books, they're able to get a little bit outside that box, which is good in one way, but in another way, it just makes it look not like a Star Trek alien. And so we have this alien that is humanoid, but very skinny, like, right? Inhumanly skinny. And Chekhov is kind of like doing like a sparring match with him. And he's talking about how, you know, he's kind of worried that he's going to kick his ass because this guy's so skinny. But then he ends up kicking his ass by kicking him in the face, right?
Yeah. We get some comedy here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some comedy. So he gets knocked out, and he's basically got the DC equivalent of stars floating around his head, and his eyes are crossed. And they're like, "Are you all right, Commander? I'm really sorry." And then Chekhov's like, "No, he's okay. I just didn't know that you kept a photon torpedo in your pocket to hit me with."
Miles Watson, do you have a photon torpedo in your pocket?
I used to when I was a younger man.
Yeah. So, there you go. So yeah, they're all laughing, and then, but they get called to the bridge or something, right? There's a siren going off. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Captain's log, stardate 8470.3. While en route to Casmus 3, we have detected a distress call from a small single pilot ship. So now they come across the same ship that we saw earlier, right? That was sending out the distress call.
Yes.
The Nazgul.
Yeah, it's a little yellow alien guy.
Right.
The Nazgul, I like that, directly taking from Tolkien. Interesting.
I had no idea. What's a Nazgul and Tolkien?
The Nazgul and Tolkien are the ring wraiths. those
take your
guys
word
on
for it.
if you saw the movies, they're the black cloaked dudes on horseback who don't have faces. They're kind of like death.
Yeah.
All right.
You've seen Lord of the Rings, right, Mike Dell?
No.
Say
I'm
what?
not a nerd. What do you got going?
Anyway. Okay. I thought you were an author, but anyway. Okay, so back to the comic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically Kirk's like, what do we know about these guys? They're like, not much. And this guy's like begging them. He's like, please, you've got to help me. I can't avoid them much longer. And he's like, I'm Argus of the Nazgul. Please, I'm begging for sanctuary. And then meanwhile, he's getting shot at by another ship. So now we see this other ship, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So they're like, okay, you know what? Just beam him over. And so they beam him onto the Enterprise. And then the bigger ship that's of the same race, they contact Kirk, and they're like, this is Kreutz of the Nazgul fleet. We are on a mission on behalf of the Sala himself. You may not interfere. So then they have this little debate over whether or not they're allowed to, but this alien race is not part of the Federation, so I guess the, what's it called, Prime Directive applies. They're not allowed to interfere. But then Spock is saying, well, you know, yeah, so they're not part of the Federation, so we don't have any, so they have every right to deal with him because he's a fleeing criminal. And then Kirk is like, but we're not in Nazgul space. No, sir. So now it's arguing back and forth. And so then Kirk orders Chekhov to bring the guest up to the bridge so they can talk to him. And so meanwhile, the bigger ship starts shooting at the Enterprise. And so they're like, oh, what are we going to do? And so they're coming around, collision course. So then the other ship smashes into the Enterprise, right? But the Enterprise is intact. Then they bring the guy onto the bridge. And he's like, you know, my name is Argus, and I'm, you know, of the Nazgul. I've decided the teachings of the Sala are insane. So this is obviously probably a religious thing, yeah. And he's like, I tried to help my people realize the insane destructive course in which we are all turned, but they did not heed me. So he's what would you call this? A religious, not rebel. What's that called? When someone's like a, you know.
A zealot?
Yeah, no. He's the opposite of a zealot, right?
Apostate.
Yeah, there you go.
I was talking about the main guy, though, like the
okay.
The villain, I guess, was what I was talking about. But no.
Yeah, the villain's a zealot, yes. So basically then Spock's like, Captain Sentries are picking up another ship, much larger. That's another ship. And then they bring it on screen. And we see a giant close-up of another guy's face.
Yeah, the would-be zealot.
Right. I am the Sala of the Nazgul. Where is the dead man who has destroyed a ship on a holy mission for the Sala? And so basically they're arguing back and forth. And then the bad guy's like, he's like, well, I sentenced you to death, right? And then even though the guy is on the Enterprise, see, like this is where, wait a minute, I'm totally confused now.
Why?
Yeah. Well, because, okay, so, because one of these aliens behind Kirk made it look like he was of the same race as this guy, but he's not. So this guy's on the Enterprise, but this Sala guy manages to somehow kill him, right, from where he is.
Yeah, he just sentences him to death. He points at him, and the guy starts dying.
Right. So is he like, so then Kirk's like, bridge to sickbay, emergency medical team to the bridge, and the bad guy's like, there is no hurry, I assure you he's dead, and now, Captain Kirk, I shall pronounce sentence on you. And then we cut away back to the subplot of the Klingons, and we have a Klingon talking to, is this the president of the Federation here, or the Starfleet?
Sure,
whatever.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. President. I can't remember what he's the president of. But basically he tells him that the Klingons are not going to rest. Oh, no. He's announced a new thing. Now there's going to be a bounty on Captain Kirk. So the Klingon Empire is offering riches beyond compared to anyone who brings us the head of James T. Kirk. So that is the second cliffhanger. So now we have 2 reasons to come back for number 2. Woo!
There you go. If you have 2 cliffhangers, you really don't have any. But all right, so Miles Watson, there he is. There's the ending of the big Star Trek issue. What do you think of this, Miles?
I have to say, this was actually better than I was expecting. I had a very low bar for this comic. It's not great. There's a lot of kind of they're emphasizing humor to the point where they're reducing a lot of the characters to caricatures, which I guess in a comic book version of a TV/movie series is maybe what the audience wanted or what they thought. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
the audience is maybe not the highest level audience that was watching the television show. It's like more kids buying comic books at this era. So I feel like they're writing the characters like Chekhov with his jokes, and you know, I feel like I guess what I'm trying to say is that they were going for a vibe of the characters are all the caricatures of the characters.
Right.
They're definitely not going for any kind of subtlety with Chekhov or Sulu or anything like that. Uhura doesn't really do anything in this, which is kind of funny because she really didn't do anything in the actual series either, but except say hailing frequencies open. But yeah, as far as the characterizations, they are what they are. It's kind of one dimensional. There's nothing here that's like a really deep insight into these characters as far as that goes. But I had such a low expectation for this, and I have to admit, I did read the comic after this, which I think is better and a little closer to where these characters were at this particular place in their development in the history or whatever, the way they changed over time.
Well, let me ask you this, Miles. Since you read the next one, does it turn out that the little guy they rescue is because I said, well, he has to be not a good guy. Like he has to be like a little. There has to be some ethical thing here, like some moral question, like the old original Star Treks. You know, we're like, should we save this guy? If maybe he's lying to them about who he is. You know, and maybe the aliens have a good reason for coming after him. But it seems like it's just pretty blatant. Like, no, he's a good guy. They're evil. They're saving him, and that's it. Was there any gray area there, or is it just straight cut and dry? He's good. They're bad.
It did seem like he's good, they're bad, and it was much more emphasizing on the Klingons, and the fact that there were some ethical dilemma as far as Kirk being late because of this incident. He was late to a diplomatic mission or a rescue mission that was potentially going to cost some lives. So they threw that in there. And they got a little deeper into the Klingons, at the beginning they're saying there's no peace while Kirk lives. And then, so we're reunited from some of the Klingons from the 5th movie who are now gunning for Kirk. And as far as the resolution of the storyline in this, they don't really resolve it. They just kind of finish. What am I trying to say here? They finished this opening act, where the Sala guy is going to, now he's turning on Kirk. They resolve that, but they don't go deeper into what the hell's going on with that society. I imagine that's an arc that they were playing out longer. But we don't learn anything beyond that, beyond the fact that the guy, they try to kill that guy, they kill him. And then the guy's like, now I'm going to pass judgment on Kirk. And that's really as far as it goes.
I just thought that was really, really lazy then, making him obviously good and then really bad. And how'd you feel about the ending there? Where you have the guy say, now, James T. Kirk, we're going to pass judgment. I want to pass judgment on you. Like, that's where the book should end. Because the minute, you go to that Klingon thing and you find out the Klingons, no, we have a bounty on Kirk's head. Well, hey, don't worry, Mr. Klingon. He's probably already dead. Because that guy's going to... So, just undercuts... It eliminates any suspense from the first one. Because, I guess Kirk's not dead because they got another storyline coming with the Klingon. So, I don't know. How'd you feel about that, Miles?
How did I feel about the
2 cliffhangers?
Oh, the double cliffhanger. Okay. Well, I don't know. I thought the way they set up the first cliffhanger was fine.
Yes. But then the second one just undercuts it and makes it irrelevant.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you there. I feel like there is a limit on how many cliffhangers you can have in a story. And you can't have everything dangling at the end of a comic. You probably should resolve one of the plots or something, or maybe just not do it as a cliffhanger. I think that the central thrust of this story starts as the Klingons, and then it shifts to this other thing. and then it kind of shifts back. I think they're trying to integrate these down the road in the series, but I don't think they do. I think these storylines run parallel to each other in this comic. Let me put it that way. They do not intersect.
Yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I just don't think you can have the one cliffhanger and then undercut it immediately with the second one, because then it's like, well, we know Kirk survives, so there's no drama whether he gets killed by that other alien. But Michael, how do you feel about all this?
No, I agree.
Wise?
Especially the more you point it out, it is true, because not only is it two cliffhangers, it's about almost the same character, right? Like they're really both about Kirk, so that really does undermine it. Yeah. I'll also say that
point. It's not something I really. It's a good insight. I hadn't really considered it.
Mm-hmm. The other thing
full
is
of good insights, Miles Watson.
Well, you're full of shit, but you also have insight.
Just don't ask me about parsecs, because I'm not sure about that.
Or Lord of the Rings or other things. But.
Yes. But yeah, so go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was going to say it was actually better than I thought it would be too, because I had, as you know, collected every single Peter David Star Trek comic, read the first few, and sold them all. So my expectations were really low, because his first run on Star Trek Volume 1 was not this good, and so this was definitely better than that.
Yes.
But it was still not as good as it could have been. I think I agree that there's kind of caricatures. They're not really characters. And I did appreciate the humor. I thought it was one thing I'm noticing as I'm rereading all my old Peter David comics is
bad humor.
Yeah, he just relies too much on humor, and I just didn't really like it.
He's not funny. He's not funny.
Sometimes he is, but sometimes he tries.
I agree with Mike L. I think sometimes he is funny, but there's way too much reliance on humor. Star Trek was not a comedy. It had some episodes that were comedic. There were a couple. It always had a few, it had a good undercurrent of comedy in some episodes. They knew how to hit touches of comedy. There's way too much reliance on comedy in the storyline, in my opinion. You gotta pick a lane. I definitely think that he went overboard with the comedy, way overboard.
Yeah, there's at least 3 instances of forced comedy with the confusing the Enterprise for a lady. There was one. Right. Then you got the Spock and playing the chess, and that lady wanting to have the sex with Sulu, and that was a little comedic. And then you got the fight scene with Chekhov and the alien, and so there's a lot of it here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is I've also found that, I mean, remember 2 years ago we read Star Wars, right? The comic book. Yeah. And at first I was excited, but after a few issues I just lost interest, just because, again, it's like, no, I'd rather just watch the movies, I never I never read the Star Wars or Star Trek novels for the same reason. I just don't, I love the movies, but I don't care enough about this to want to read like bad versions of these characters in books or comics.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like Miles was mentioning earlier, it's usually like a watered down version of what the movie or TV show is. Can you think of a good adaptation, Michael, where like they actually captured in the spirit of the thing and then kept it rolling pretty good? Or
honestly, I'm a huge fan of the G.I. Joe and Transformers comics, but funny enough, those were both written by people who had never seen episodes of the cartoon. So maybe that's why they were good.
I like that Indiana Jones we read.
Yeah, it was okay.
That was pretty good in terms of capturing what Indy was about, I guess. But I don't know, Miles Watson, can you think of any movie adaptations in comic book form that you and your brother enjoyed as kids or anything?
Honestly,
Logan's Run. I always think of Logan's Run for some reason.
Wow, that's the
70s.
You know about Logan's Run, but not Lord of the Rings. That's I love what Mike Dell in his mind defines as nerddom. That to me is just, that should be a podcast in itself. What the fuck is he thinking? Podcast.
Nerds.
But no, to be honest, I was never from the time I was a little kid. I read a ton of like the Raiders of the Lost Ark one from the original movie, and I wasn't felt so good. Like. No, they never really got it right. And I think the reason that they never got it right is because they were hiring, in those days especially, it was a very different business. And they didn't hire people who were like, you didn't have this whole thing of like, I'm a fan or fandom. That didn't exist the way it does now. It just didn't exist. So you hired writers who who were given a basic outline, and then they wrote they did a job. It was a square peg in a round hole type of situation where you have these guys, they don't know what the fuck they were talking about with the characters and the situations. They didn't. So it's an approximation of what we knew as the characters. Star Wars, Star Trek. They always seem to get it wrong. Like the Star Wars comics that I read.
That's the weird thing about this, though, is Peter David's a big Star Trek fan, going to conventions.
Yeah, and I do think he does a good job of caricaturing them very well, almost to the point of depth in a couple of scenes, like when Kirk is talking about how he needs this lady in his life. That is a very Kirk theme from the TOS series. Kirk needs the Enterprise. Star Trek II, the movie. Kirk ultimately, like, even in the first season of Trek, 3 or 4 episodes in, it's established that although Kirk wants a woman in his life, his number one priority, number one woman is the Enterprise. That's always his first love.
Just
That's
like the end of Cheers, where Sam Malone's real love is the bar. So see that,
right.
Mike? We can do that Cheers podcast. Like,
right. In your heart, that's clearly what you want to do. But
it is. God, honestly, if there's a Cheers comic book, I'd be so happy.
The Trek. Oh God, Jesus, don't even go there. They would have Woody talking, never mind. That's we're going to go way too far off the rails. But I feel like basically, to answer your question, I feel like when it comes to a lot of those things, I just feel like they got the voices wrong. And that goes as far as like even novelizations, like Alan Dean Foster, did the novelization for Aliens and stuff. The voices are wrong. James Blish did the books, and this is going to be a controversial take because a lot of Trek fans love those James Blish novels from Star Trek back in the 70s, but I couldn't stand them because I just felt like he was writing dialogue that had nothing to do with the characters. If you can't hear in your mind the voice of the character saying those words, the writer has failed.
What if you hear Mike Ella doing an impersonation? Because he brought Chekhov to life.
I would be so confused by that.
Mike Ella, how'd you...
The nuclear Wetzel, yes.
How'd you feel about the art here, Mike Ella? James Fry.
James Fry. Wait, you mean the guy who listens to Here Comes the Spider Cat?
What? Oh, no.
I got a comment, just a random one, and it was from a guy named James Fry who thanked us on Here Comes the Spider Cast for reviewing his story Clobber in Time from Marvel Tales number 198. And he said he's like he was exposed to the podcast by Sholly Fish, who writes for DC Comics.
Holy hell!
And then
look at this, Miles Watson. Yeah. People are listening to Mike L. yapping about comic books.
And then he said if he has a story about Stan Lee, and if I ever want to hear it, let him know. So I wrote him, and he ignored me. but then he said, in the meantime, best of luck with the podcast, a bona fide, true to life. And then there's more, but I didn't screen cap that part.
Oh,
did you tell him you were Canadian though? Because that's probably the truth.
That's probably it.
Yeah. But so be careful. Don't bury him too hard. Because he might be listening.
Probably like he's North American.
North American. So, but why do you feel about this art here, Michael? And by the way, when you did that Marvel Tales or whatever, did you like his art in there, or were you guys harsh?
I was actually the harshest on his art. So if you're listening, James, your art's great here. I think it's fine. I will say though that obviously the problem with any adaptation is, again, you want the characters to look like they do in the show, right? But by doing that, you kind of make the art stiff, right? Because you're copying photographs and copying whatever. Now, the cover looks amazing, I think, which is by Jerome K. Moore, I think it is.
Yes. Yeah,
the inside art is pretty good, but it's kind of like...
The thing that bugged me, Michael, is like you were mentioning, like their faces look very much like the characters. Like almost photorealistic sometimes. But then the bodies, are cartoony, what I mean? So it's like it was a tough... It was a tough match. It seemed like a mishmash of styles.
That's the problem. Even with for example, X-Files. I love X-Files, but I could never read the comics because it just looked like a cartoon of a photograph just imprinted on a random body.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
Did you get that same sense, Miles, when you're looking at these characters?
What that as far as I got hung up when he was talking about X-Files. I was trying to think that 'cause I never saw the
like their
X-Files
faces
comic.
look very detailed, like almost like a photo of the character, like the actor. But then the rest of the art is like cartoony or comic booky, so like they don't match all the time.
They were definitely 100% in this comic. They were going all out to make the cast faces look like real, the actual faces of those actors, those characters.
Yes.
Yeah. I was jarred by how cartoony the aliens looked. Like they looked like shit to me, like absolute shit, like really Saturday morning cartoon
James.
crap.
Listening.
Yeah, really bad. I was jarred by that. I was jarred by how much effort they went into making it look like, okay, like we're gonna make, especially with like a minor character like Chekhov. They were like, wow, we're gonna make this really look like him, and then we're gonna make this alien look like a sack of shit. I don't understand that logic exactly because frankly, I think the aliens look terrible in this. And they're just as bad in the other in the next one. The Klingons, it's like they made them look like they're supposed to look.
Yeah, that first splash page of the Klingon pointing at the camera and yelling, that's great,
Yeah, and that goes for the second comic too, which I don't suppose I should reference, but I don't understand why they made if you're gonna create aliens for the purposes of a comic, why make them look like shit cartoon characters? I don't understand that logic. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, like, if you're gonna go outside the box, then make them look even less humanoid, right? Like, just make them look completely outlandish instead of these. Yeah, like they're not even good non-humanoid aliens. They're just like this skinny guy with like these eyes. It's just not very imaginative, I guess, right?
Yeah, it looks weird. Michael, how'd you feel? I also got annoyed at some of the page layouts and the panel designs. Like he was doing some crazy stuff with the panels, and there's one page in particular where they had to he had to put an arrow from one panel to the next to tell you which sequence to read it in. Right. And that's always a bad sign. Anytime you have to put an arrow to tell the reader what panel to go to next, that's a bad layout.
I agree.
Like it shouldn't be that way. But he does some really. I mean, you always want to reward creativity and whatnot, but if you start noticing the panel designs, it's a problem, And,
I agree. Not great.
Yep. Wasn't a fan. Sorry, James. Wasn't a fan. What can you do? Miles Watson, anything else you'd like to add about this book?
Just general. Are we still talking about art or just general?
Just in general. Anything we missed?
I would say this. I do feel that this was a fairly earnest effort in its way to. Here's the thing about the Trek original series. The original series was three seasons, and it had its own aesthetic with the primary colors and the very distinctive artistic aesthetic of Trek and everything they were trying to do. Then they got into the movies, and the movies have also their own aesthetic, right? But they're dealing with much older characters and so forth. So it's a very different dynamic, and there's these huge gaps in the Trek story. Between the series and the first movie, you're talking, there's a very substantial gap of like 10 years. Between the films, there's gaps of several years. And so these artists are trying to do something, to sort of say like, well, what happened after Kirk came back and got the ship back after the motion picture? And now he's then he does this and that. They're trying, and I think it's an earnest effort to sort of continue the whole story of like, what did these guys do and where did they go and what adventures did they have when, Kirk was still in his 40s and he was kind of on his 2.0 as a captain. But again, I think it just falls into caricature. Mm-hmm. This was better than I expected, but it was better than I expected. And I think it probably got better as it went along. But it's still that kind of blurry watercolor version of the original, and maybe it's not possible to reproduce the real dynamic. Maybe the caricature is as far as it goes. I don't know. But
so what would you give it 1 out of 10, Miles Watson? Star Trek issue 1, 1989.
From my expectation standpoint, I'd give it a 7 because
whoa, all right.
From my expectation standpoint, I was expecting a 2. So based on my expectations, I'd give it a 7. Based on the actual quality of it, I'd give it like a 6.
Wow, still high praise. Mike L, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll give it a 6 as well. That was my number, just because it's not great, but it's enjoyable. And like I said, it's better than the Volume 1 issues that I did read by Peter David. So, on that level, my expectations were low as well, so that's why I'm giving it a 6.
Well, I didn't like I had very low expectations, and they were met. I did not like the writing. I did not like the art. But Leonard Nimoy was a killer on one episode of Columbo, and William Shatner was a killer on 2 episodes of Columbo. So you add them up, and I'll give it a 3. So there you go.
Unbelievable.
A 3. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. This wasn't enjoyable. This was not enjoyable for me. This was. It hurt to look at. No offense, James.
I hope James isn't listening, but continue.
I didn't enjoy looking at it. And the Peter David, he just annoys me. I've never read anything I've liked that he's done. I just haven't. I don't know. Michael, maybe you should make a list of like the best Peter David stories that I could read, because I just have never read anything I enjoyed from Peter David.
Star Trek is number 1. Hulk is number 2. I'm just kidding. I mean, hit the Hulk.
Spider-Mans we did for Spider-Cast.
Oh, those were great. Also, the Hulk ones we did. Who was in our Hulk episode? I don't remember.
Yeah,
but
Kevin Jank. Miles Watson's blood rival.
That was great.
Yeah.
It wasn't Peter David. That was like year 1 for Peter David, but it was still
not good at all.
It was good. It was fine.
All right. So I'm not a fan of this. There you go. So Star Trek issue 1, 1989. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you could try and read it. You the listener out there. But I don't know. Hey, so get a load of this, Michael. You ready for my pick for next week?
I'm ready.
All right, since you picked a TV show book this week, I'm going to pick one. And Miles, I know you're a big fan of this show.
Uh-oh.
But I have already booked a guest for next week. Our buddy Bob Myers is going to come back on, Michael.
Cool.
To discuss this. But we're going to go back to 1989, just like same year from this book. And we're going to do Alf, issue 22.
Oh, my God.
Miles loves Alf. But I'm sorry, Miles. We have Bob coming on next week.
I would take a flamethrower to Alf so fast. I would throw Alf in a wood chipper. I would throw acid at Alf. I would feed Alf to dogs.
I love Alf.
I would nail Alf to a burning cross.
Alf is my favorite. It's the best.
I would sink Alf into the ocean.
All right, we get it. You don't like Alf. All right,
what issue number did you say, Mike Dell?
22. Because in issue 22, they do a parody of the X-Men, Michael. So, like, we're kind of
cool.
So, man, can't wait.
Right.
Alf.
All right. Well, I'm excited too. We want to thank Miles Watson for joining us on his 10th appearance.
That's right.
Wow.
And go buy his books at Amazon.com, 19books.com. Sinner's Cross, Knuckle Down, Cage Life, Devils You Know. And he's got other little short stories and stuff you can buy. Go support Miles Watson because he loves Alf.
Fuck you. I hate Alf. It's not true. Audience, don't listen. Don't listen to him. He's lying to you.
All right. On that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us. You can find every episode of Flea Market Fantasy on Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts under Comic Book Syndicate. You can also follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and the Comic Book Syndicate website. Each week we review a different Bronze Age comic. 1 week I pick, 1 week Mike Dell picks. So until next Tuesday, despite...